And we brought Israelis and Palestinians together at a political level, and Aqua and the whole Shram. Yes. And as I affirmed the Prime Minister.
This is my video update from Moscow, Russia on this Wednesday afternoon, July the 19th. Let's talk about some news. And we have the big story for today, which was announced in the morning, which is that Russian President Vladimir Putin will not be attending the BRICS summit in South Africa. It is now official. Lavrov will be attending that summit in place of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And I think this is a very good move. This is a very smart move. I actually talked about this about a month ago, maybe like a month and a half ago, maybe. I don't know. I'm not good with time. But I said in a video when the ICC warrant came out and then South Africa started to get pressure from the collective West about arresting Putin, if Putin was to attend the BRICS summit in South Africa, I said in a video that, best to not risk it. You have so many other capable officials in the government, Lavrov being one of them, perhaps the most capable Russian government official. And why not send him? And you can, whatever you need to do as Russian president, you can attend via video conference, and you don't take the risk at this time to travel to South Africa, which is a long distance, and I wasn't so concerned about Putin being in South Africa, that South Africa would arrest him. I was more concerned about the actual flight from Moscow to South Africa. You never know what these neocons might do. I mean, they're they're losing their mind as Project Ukraine falls apart. They're getting very desperate, and who knows what they would have done to Putin as he was traveling to South Africa. Who knows? But why take your chance when you have someone like Lavrov who can go there and can handle everything that needs to be taken care of at this BRICS summit, and anything that Vladimir Putin needs to attend in person, let's say, he can be there via video. So I think this was a good move. I talked about this in videos in the past, that you should send Lavrov, and that is exactly what the Russian government is doing. And just yesterday, South Africa was getting a whole ton of pressure from the collective West to arrest Vladimir Putin if he were to attend the summit in South Africa. It also takes off a lot of pressure from the host country. South Africa and the government there doesn't have to deal with the pressure from the collective West and the media. If Putin were to attend the BRICS summit in South Africa, can you imagine the articles that would be appearing from the collective West? South Africa needs to arrest Putin now. I can't believe that Putin was allowed to sit at a table and have lunch with other world leaders and he's not being arrested, and all of this stuff. They would have just come after South Africa really, really hard, and they would have probably put a lot of pressure on South Africa in other ways that we don't know about. So I think this solves a big problem, a big headache for South Africa, for Russia, and you get Lavrov at the BRICS summit. How cool is that? So Lavrov is a rock star. So it's gonna be a good summit, and everything will be fine. And Putin doesn't risk the travel to South Africa. So that is the big story. And since we're talking about arrest warrants, the EU Parliament wants to issue an arrest warrant for Lukashenko as well. The ICC. The EU Parliament wants the ICC to issue an arrest warrant for Lukashenko. Why? Oh no, just because he's friends with Putin. That's the standard now, to issue an ICC arrest warrant. On good terms with Putin, ICC arrest warrant. Oh boy, crazy stuff. They're getting very, very desperate. Very desperate. Why countries sign up to the ICC, to the Hague, the ICC? What is it? The Rome Statute beats me. It beats me why they sign up to that. I mean, I know why they're forced to sign up to the Rome Statute because they bundle it with all kinds of other stuff, you know, like IMF aid or World Bank money. So if you want to get the World Bank money, well, then you have to sign up to the Rome Statute, ICC, Hague stuff. And so countries are like, okay, if that's what it means for me to unlock IMF funds or whatever, then I'll sign up to the ICC. And if you want to leave the Rome Statute or the ICC, well, then they blackmail you there as well, and they say, well, if you pull out of the ICC, well, then we're not going to allocate money and funds and stuff like that to you. That's how they get the countries to commit to this nonsense. All right, so let's now talk about Joint Chiefs of Staff. Is he the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff still, or has he been replaced, Mr. Mark Milley? I think he's been replaced, or he's about to be replaced. Either way, he was speaking to the media yesterday, and he was talking about Project Ukraine and the big counteroffensive that offends me and offends you and offends everybody. It's a basketball court right there. And right over here, really nice stuff, huh? I love it when they paint the sides of the buildings. That's Crimea right there. So Milley, he was giving an update on the big counteroffensive that offends everyone, and that was supposed to take 5 days to reach the Sea of Azov, and was going to split the Russian forces in two, and was going to cut off the logistics of the Russian military, and then it would allow the Ukraine military to liberate Crimea. Right? To liberate Crimea, of which Crimea was liberated in 2014-15 when they democratically voted to join the Russian Federation. Brian Berletic, he was on Danny's podcast the other day, and he talks a bit about Crimea and how the narrative about the collective West and Ukraine liberating Crimea is nonsense, because as Brian rightly points out, Crimea was already liberated. They decided to join, to ascend into the Russian Federation. Anyway, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here talking about Crimea, but that was the plan. The plan was to make it to the Sea of Azov in 5 days, lightning speed strike, and the Russian military would be panicking as they saw the Ukraine military advancing. They would drop their weapons, and they would run away, run away, run away. And that was what everyone in the collective West thought was going to happen. Instead, what they got is a counter-offensive disaster. And actually, Russia now is on the counter to the counter-offensive. They're actually launching their own counter-offensive quite successfully. From the reports that I'm getting, you can follow Alexander Mercurius' channel, and he gets into detail on Russian troop advances in their counter-offensive. Milley, back to Milley. So what did Milley say? He said that the counteroffensive is in its early stages. He said there's still lots of fighting left, but the Ukraine military is making steady progress. It's making steady progress by not gaining the territory that they said they're going to be gaining, because they still have not reached the first line of Russian fortifications. And when you look at a map, they haven't really moved anywhere, to be quite honest. It's pretty much a stalemate, except for the Russian advances up north. But Milley said that it's going to be a long and hard fight. And he also said, he was asked if this was a failure, if the counteroffensive was a failure by the media. And he said it wasn't a failure. He said that there have been trained over 60,000 troops, 63,000 troops, NATO trained, and Ukraine still has a long way to go before they've been exhausted or defeated. So that was Milley's statement to the media. And 63,000 troops, I think, was the number, or 67,000. But I said in a video from Yerevan a couple of days ago that if you believe the Russian Ministry of Defense, where they said that Ukraine had lost from June 4th up until a couple of days ago, the casualties have been 26,000 Ukraine military. And say you have 67,000 NATO trained involved in this counteroffensive. That's a huge loss for the Ukraine military. How is Milley expecting them to advance from the front line, because they haven't really advanced in a month and a half, from the starting point? I mean, that's where they are. They're at the starting point. From the starting point to the Sea of Azov. How is he expecting a little more than half of the forces that they've trained to make it to the Sea of Azov and to break through 3 lines of Russian defenses? And then they have to hold that territory, and then they have to make a move towards Crimea. And obviously, as they make their move past these Russian fortifications, the remaining amount of soldiers from this 67,000, and I'm actually being quite generous, I believe, with the number of 67,000, but let's just say 67,000, they're going to sustain terrible losses as well. So how is all of this supposed to work? How is Ukraine supposed to reach the Sea of Azov and then make a move towards Crimea with the numbers that we are now getting? The numbers from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the numbers that the Pentagon is giving out. I'm quoting Alexander, I'm not a military person, but I don't see how this can be done. I really don't. The Washington Post, they're reporting, citing those famous, infamous, anonymous U.S. officials, that Washington is pressuring Ukraine big time to make gains in this offensive. And the Washington Post is reporting that the Biden White House is upset that the Ukraine military is not using Western-styled combined arms operations in this offensive. And they're actually reverting back to attrition warfare and artillery strikes and stuff like that. And the Washington Post is saying that Washington, the Pentagon, the Biden White House, they want Ukraine to use combined arms, maneuver warfare. That's what they want Ukraine to that's the style that they want Ukraine to fight going forward in this offensive. They don't like the attrition war, and they're very upset about it. And they're demanding that the Zelensky regime, change their style of fighting. They want them to fight like NATO, right? If NATO wants to fight maneuver warfare with the Russians, why don't NATO go in there instead of sending Ukraine to do it? If NATO is so good at combined arms, maybe they are. Maybe they're the best at combined arms, maneuver warfare and stuff like that. If they are the best, why don't they show the Ukraine military how it's done? God help us. But they won't. They're going to send the Ukraine military in there, and then they're going to criticize from afar that they're not fighting the way they should be fighting. And they're supposed to do all of this without air support outgunned by the Russian military, and with minimal training, like this rapid training that took place on NATO territory. And Washington is expecting the Ukraine military to beat the Russians using maneuver warfare and combined arms operations. Doesn't sound like a good plan, if you ask me, but I'm no expert. I bet you that the combined arms operations, pushing Ukraine to fight in this way, my guess would be that it probably extends the conflict out. It's not effective, and it's not going to defeat the Russian military, and the Ukraine soldiers are going to probably suffer terrible losses. But maybe this type of fighting extends the war out, and perhaps it gives the Biden White House a bit more time to keep the fighting going until they figure out a way out of this mess, or a way to escalate this further so they can get into an even bigger mess. Who knows? Knowing the Biden White House, that's probably what they're looking to do, to dig an even deeper hole. But Ben Wallace, the outgoing UK defense minister, who has been hit by the Zelensky curse, he gave a statement yesterday, and he said that the UK military has learned a lot from this conflict in Ukraine, and that they're going to build weapons because of everything that has been going on in Ukraine, and they're going to study the way the weapons have been working, and they're going to adapt and adjust and have a stronger military, because they sent the Ukraine military to fight the Russians. And so the UK military and Ben Wallace, they're basically telling the Ukraine military, thanks a lot for fighting the Russians and for helping us to learn a lot about how this type of war is conducted. Quite a statement from Ben Wallace. And let's do one more story, and let's talk about a Bloomberg article which came out yesterday, which was reporting on the EU Caribbean Latin American summit that took place the other day. Bloomberg says this was a historic summit because it's been 8 years since the last time the European Union decided to engage with Caribbean nations and Latin American nations. And I want to read you some of this Bloomberg article because it's pretty revealing as to how clueless the EU leadership really are when you read some of the statements from this Bloomberg article. So let me just read you some paragraphs that I've highlighted, and then we'll get into my clown world. So the title of the Bloomberg article is EU's Latin America Charm Offensive Hits a Roadblock Over Putin. The European Union courted its Latin American and Caribbean guests over 2 days with a performance of classical music and a gala dinner. But the summit was overshadowed by a diplomatic quarrel over just how, if at all, to criticize Russia or President Vladimir Putin for the invasion. Officials from the EU camp fingered Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela as the most resistant to the EU's lobbying for a strong condemnation of Russia. Diplomats haggled over whether the statement should refer to the war in or against Ukraine, and whether name-checking Russia was acceptable, said officials who asked not to be named on closed-door talks. The summit was a failure because the EU was pressuring Latin American countries and Caribbean countries to outright blame Russia for the conflict in Ukraine, and they refused to do so. And so For the European Union, this was a failure of a summit. The Bloomberg article then goes on to say that one of the other goals of the summit was to obtain raw materials from this region. Underpinning the Ukraine debate is another key EU push to secure critical raw materials for digital and green energy goals. The EU is struggling to recover from years of neglecting the region. This week's summit was the first such meeting in 8 years and only the third one ever held. The result was a joint statement that expressed deep concern on the ongoing war against Ukraine, with no mention of Russia, and backed the need for peace. It was a frank discussion, clearly showing that there are differences amongst us, the EU foreign policy chief Josep Borrell said in an interview with Bloomberg. Whenever a collective West diplomat says it was a frank discussion, it means it went really, really bad. The article then goes on to say that Germany's Olaf Scholz played up the outcome. Quote, "It's remarkable that we found a wording which many can support, which we maybe didn't even expect in the past," Scholz said. "My impression is that there's a global shift. Russia shows more and more that it has imperialist threats," says the Chancellor of Germany, which is a member of the European Union, the imperialist European Union. The article then says that the issue is partly an attitude problem, Bloomberg says. Latin America fears that now the European Union is looking to them only for mineral resources, says Jose Ignacio Torreblanca, head of the Madrid office of the European Council of Foreign Relations, a think tank. The summit is a beginning. The EU is saying we care. History is also a factor. Sometimes we're viewed as condescending, and sometimes we're viewed as former colonizers, Latvia's Kristianis Karins said in an interview. Well, because you want to plunder Latin America and the Caribbean's resources. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, you were colonizers. You are colonizers. In any case, it was impossible to convince countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela of Russian guilt, according to a senior official from a member country. They were loyal to Putin because his support allowed their leaders to remain in power, the official said, as opposed to not supporting Putin so that the European Union can regime change me out. Yeah, thank you, no thank you. Oh my God. Yeah, they like Putin because Putin doesn't want to regime change them. Go figure. Go figure. You know, the difference between BRICS and the EU is that when the BRICS have a summit and they want to do business, they don't demand that you condemn another country or another world leader. They just want to do business. Where the EU, if they want to do business with Latin America, as they're trying to do business with Latin America and to court Latin America, which is fine. You know, it's good to do business and to trade, no problem. But they demand that Latin America condemn Russia, condemn Putin as a prerequisite before working together. That's the difference. Let's see here. Does this article say anything else? Still, one EU official played down the competition from the BRICS, saying that the more it expands, the weaker it would become. The EU told Argentina that joining the BRICS now, during Russia's war in Ukraine, would send the wrong signal, the official said, and the country won't be joining anytime soon. So the more BRICS expands, the weaker it gets. The more the EU or NATO expands, the better the world is, the stronger it gets? Explain that one. And the EU telling Argentina not to join BRICS. I thought you're not allowed to tell countries what organizations or institutions they're allowed to join. Wasn't that the whole Ukraine joining NATO argument. Who's Russia to tell Ukraine not to join NATO? But now the EU is telling Argentina not to join BRICS. Okay, got it. Got it. Just so we understand the rules, the rules-based order, as they call it. Anyway, let's do a clown world. I just thought that was an interesting article from Bloomberg. It really does show how clueless and how much in a bubble the EU leadership is. And since we're talking about clueless leaders, we have to talk about Annalena Baerbock, who once again makes our clown world segment. I have to say, Annalena Baerbock, she is miles ahead of the competition for the prestigious award of clown world of the year. she is way ahead. I mean, there is no one even close to her. And she's given us another gem with this statement. Every missile fired at the port of Odessa is also a missile fired at the starving people of this world. That is what Annalena Baerbock said the other day. Every missile fired at the port of Odessa is also a missile fired at the starving people of this world. Annalena Baerbock, German foreign minister. Boy, how she ended up as German foreign minister is one of the great mysteries of the world. It really is. It really, really is. So since we're talking about the grain deal, here's a quick update. So yesterday, when the news came out that Russia was not going to be renewing its participation in the grain deal, the Collective West media, Ursula von der Crazy, Zelensky, Stoltenberg, all of these Collective West officials, they came out with statements, the United Nations, they came out with statements saying that because Russia is not going to be taking part in the grain deal, that 400 million people in impoverished countries face starvation. And that was the narrative that we were hearing yesterday. And today, Russia came out with a solution to this apparent problem that Zelensky tweeted about yesterday, Russia being the cause of starvation to hundreds of millions of people. Russia said, you know what we'll do? We'll provide the grain to the countries that need it for free. Gratis. At no cost. Problem solved. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. The Duran, of course, the Collective West is not going to report on this, and they're going to make sure that you don't hear about Russia's offer to provide grain for free to the countries that need it. But that is what the Russian government said yesterday. Anyway, that is the video, everybody. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up some merch, 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. It is a cold, rainy, windy day here in Moscow, and I've got my Duran hoodie with the flag of Kenya. Kenya representing here in Moscow. All right, everybody, take care.